share 52 practical answers to your questions. I'm Erin Wolfram. I own and operate Career Advantage and Career Advantage Golf, where I help professionals feel more confident and prepared throughout their job search by helping them with things like resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, mock interviews, really just anything job search related. But each week on this podcast, I answer one question from the public. So I'm really excited today to have a guest with me to give us a human resources perspective. So Missy Dray is here with Landplan Engineering, and Missy and I know each other from our local Society for Human Resources Management chapter. So Missy, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes. Well, thank you, Erin, for having me here. This is, I think, going to be a really fun opportunity. My human resource experience mostly comes from the last 3.5 years that I've been working for Landplan. We're a company of about 25 to 30 civil engineers, community planners, landscape architects, and land surveyors. And we have 2 offices, one here in Lawrence, in Kansas, and then the other one is in the Woodlands in Texas. And I am an HR department of 1 for both of those locations.
And this week's question is it okay to ask what a typical day would look like or to shadow an organization before committing to a position? So we know that, culture is really important. There are a lot of other factors that are really important in accepting a job, and ultimately you never really know what you're getting into, no matter how much research you do, how many questions you ask during that interview. So what are some ways that people can kind of figure out a little bit more, beyond just that interview? So is it okay to ask about a typical day, or to even ask if they can come in and, shadow? What do you think, Missy?
I think that asking what a typical day would look like is probably one of the smartest questions that you can ask in an interview. It tells me, at least from my perspective, it tells me that this person is really trying to picture themselves in the organization, and, is this really something that I'm going to want to do every single day for the next blank number of years? With what we do at Landplan, there's definite limits to something like shadowing, but that doesn't mean that every place wouldn't be able to. You can always ask. The worst thing they can say is, yeah, we probably won't shadow, but because we have like client confidentiality, we're a design firm, and there's lots of things like that that have to be taken into consideration. So we probably wouldn't have anybody shadow. But I get asked this question in interviews a lot. People frequently say, so what would a typical day here look like? And I like watching our project managers like scramble sometimes, like, well, actually, and then I usually start in, well, you're gonna come in and you're gonna see like where your project manager has assigned for you that day, and you're gonna sit down and work on it, and you're gonna live at a computer, like that's really what it looks like around here. But you've got some cool people to talk to when you take a few minutes here and there, and a lot of other intelligent folks that you can ask questions of when you need it. And so it's an atmosphere where I can tell them, our culture definitely is advantageous for somebody who is doesn't need a whole lot of supervision, but who wants to ask a question when they really have it, as opposed to someone that needs a helicopter supervisor. Like, that's not really how we work. And it's definitely a good place for somebody who wants versatility in their abilities as far as the kind of stuff that we do. It's not like, well, we have this, then we have that person do it, and if we need to do this, we have that person do it. It's like, we want to train everybody to be able to do a lot of different things. So if you're somebody that just wants to be in your little niche over here in the corner, that's probably, you're not going to like it here because we're going to ask you to learn how to do this and this and this and this, so that we can turn to you with a variety of things that we might need. That we have a company lunch once a month, you know, that, yeah, you're going to have to interact with people for, you know, if you just want to hide over in your little space and never talk to anybody, like, you're probably not going to enjoy it here. We kind of, you know, we got rid of all of our cubicles, and so people actually talk to each other. They were like, oh my gosh, other people work here. when they got rid of the ant farm in the back.
Right.
And then it was like, oh, then they started asking questions that much more. And then they kind of got to know each other. Like, oh, my coworkers are actually kind of cool people sometimes. And we actually can have a little bit of fun as well. And you know, it gives me an opportunity to kind of run them through what I believe our culture points are, because your company has a culture, whether you mean for it to or not.
Right.
So when you identify those things, then you can actually speak to those facets in the person. Be like, if you're not comfortable in an open environment, you're not going to be comfortable here, because we got
Right.
some people that are a little bit loud and other people that just make sure they've always got their headphones. You know, if you want like your little space in your little corner and separated from everybody else, you are probably not going to like it here. But
Right.
it's a totally legitimate question. And when we interview people, especially if like the project manager or our CEO really likes somebody and they're thinking about probably bringing them back for a second interview, they'll say, you know, hey, you want to walk around and see, you know, the space? Do you want to see how about we take you around and show you the office? So we wouldn't do shadowing per se, but we would walk them around and show them, you know, like, here's where all of this kind of thing happens, and here's our conference room, and here's where the landscape architecture section is, and that's what all these people work on, and here's where all the engineers are, and, you know, get to meet some people and maybe chat with a couple of our current employees. And, you know, but again, even doing all of that only gives, I mean, anybody can be cool on a first date, you know.
Right.
So right. It's hard. You're not going to walk in with 100% assurity like you would to anything else, but it definitely, I think, puts you on a better idea of what it's going to be like day in and day out. And absolutely ask the question. Absolutely ask the question. Even if they can't give you a tour, maybe they can. Even if they can't have you shadow, maybe they can. Ask, but definitely at least ask, what is a typical day here like?
Absolutely. No, I think that I agree 100%. That is a great question to ask. And, you know, I think you brought up a really good point as to why an organization may not be able to have someone shadow. It's not that they don't want that person to shadow. It's that they may not be able to, for, like you said, confidentiality reasons, things like that. And, you know, ultimately, the employer wants this to be a good hire. So they should be transparent. You know, they shouldn't want to hide things, because if it's not a good fit, it's not going to work out, and that ultimately costs the employer money. So, you know, ask those questions that you know, need to be able to make a decision that's right for you, because I mean, in the end, you want this relationship to benefit both you and the organization. So I think that's really important to remember. And, you know, something else that I thought about when we're talking about, you know, the tour, for example, you know, one, I think that's another great thing to ask is, you know, can I have a tour of the facility? And like you said, they could at least get to meet some of their potential new colleagues. And, you know, something they could possibly do after that tour is follow up with those people on LinkedIn or send them an email after, and maybe even ask them a couple of more questions that could help them really evaluate the organization. So it's so important to ask those questions, do your research, evaluate the organization so it is a good fit for everyone. So thank you so much, Missy. Great advice. Anything to kind of wrap up this question today?
You know, I definitely think that the prevailing research currently, especially from the employer standpoint, is that you want to hire to culture. You know, that's going to make a lot more of a difference even than in a lot of cases education and experience, because if the culture is not a good fit, then the rest of it's not going to matter. And so I think it's also important for a prospective employee. I ask people, I'm like, what is the number one cultural aspect that you're looking for? And maybe another way to say that is like, what is the most important thing you want to have happen at your next job? And
Hmm,
maybe
that's a
that
great
answer
question.
is like, yeah, well, because maybe the answer is, maybe they had a real issue in their last job because they felt like they were getting no communication. And so then it would be, I really want to know that I know what's going on, and like important information isn't being hidden from me. And so, okay, if I know that, and if I know our organization kind of has a problem with that, then maybe I want to think about either what we can do to do something different to make this person feel like they're getting the information they need, or maybe it's not a reasonable hire because we actually have a lot of stuff based on either proprietary information, client confidentiality, or other things. It's like you kind of have to sometimes go along with what we really can tell you in this moment. And if
Right.
that's not going to be good for them, they may not like it here. But I always turn it back around. I'm like, be ready for the flip side to that question when it's asked of you. It's like, what is your culture need?
Exactly. Exactly. I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say, so it's so important to know what you want as a candidate as far as culture or, in a job. So it's so important to do your research on the organization, but it's just as important to do research on yourself. And so
Yes.
that preparation is key and all throughout the job search process. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Great advice. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet. Anytime.
If you have any job search or career development related questions, you can always reach out to me. You can find my contact information on my websites, which are careeradvantageresumes.com and careeradvantagegolf.com. You can also find me on social media. I'm at Career Advantage Resumes on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and at Advantage Career on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining and have a great rest of your week.